if you were, as a Spanish naval officer, to hire your pantaloon and comb, you couldn't possibly get any higher rank than Major was. This is stop number, what is this, 9, I think? Or 10, this is 10, I don't remember. We changed their numbers up, so if you see a different number on your map than what I say, go with the map.
Thank you.
I think this is 10. This is 10. There was a man by the name of Mr. Don Juan Ponce de Leon. He was the governor of Puerto Rico. But you know, he lost his job to Christopher Columbus's son. Don't you just hate unemployment? I know I do. Now, Ponce, he didn't like it either. But he had a way out, which was sailing and searching for treasure. He was told by the Puerto Rican natives that he'd find an island to the north called Bimini. And on the island of Bimini was supposed to be the Fountain of Youth. That fountain had fruit trees surrounding it with golden fruit on the branches. There were beautiful maidens that would pluck the fruit and feed it to you. If you drank from the water, you'd not only stop aging, you would age backwards and get young again. Now that is just what Ponce needed after losing his job. But he missed Bimini. He sailed right by. He ended up landing here Easter Sunday, 1513. There were wild flowers blooming everywhere. It reminded Ponce of an Easter celebration back in Spain that was called Pascua de Flores, which literally means a feast of flowers. So Ponce named the place after the flowers of La Florida. He did not discover Florida. There were already 100,000 Native Americans here to greet him when he arrived. But Ponce did discover something important for Spain. It was the Gulf Stream. Now the Gulf Stream is a rapidly moving current of water off our coast that would slingshot the treasure ships back to Spain in half the time. Now those ships, they were laden with gold and silver, like you would imagine, but they also had spices on board and every pirate's favorite food, chocolate. That's what us pirates were after. Now you can't eat the gold and silver. It was the chocolate and the rum. Those are the true treasures. Spain tried to settle Florida several times after Ponce had arrived. 50 years went by and they couldn't get it done. It was due to hostile natives, lack of supplies, or bad weather. But then there was a settlement that got started up near present-day Jacksonville called Fort Caroline. Now, Fort Caroline was French, and that really ticked off King Philip II. You know, the French had arrived here. So he sent his most trusted admiral. In response, Pedro Menendez. If you look out here to the left, beyond the trees, you gotta look for an opening, you'll see the Great Cross. It marks the landing site of Pedro Menendez, September 8th, 1565. Pedro Menendez was given 3 orders by the king once he arrived here. Number 1, get rid of the French. Number 2, settle the place once and for all for Spain. And number 3, Christianize the Native Americans. That third order was totally outside of his job description, so he brought his friend with, Father Francis Lopez. It was Father Francis who got off the ship first. When he came ashore, he made a cross out of palm logs. Pedro then arrived. Pedro marched up to the cross, along with a lot of ceremony, cannons going off, muskets blasting, flags unfurled, music playing. He kneels down, he kisses the cross, reclaims the land for Spain, but this time it was done so in the name of God. Well, there was an Indian village watching all this from the trees, and they were so intrigued with what they saw, they didn't feel threatened at all. In fact, they wanted to make friends. It was the village of Saloy. They were Timucuans. They imitated Pedro Menendez. They marched up to the cross, and they knelt down and kissed it. They reclaimed the land for Spain. This time it was done so in the name of God. What am I saying? Sometimes I get my marchers mixed up. I'm talking about the Timucuans. Anyway, they did become instant friends. They celebrated a meal together. A meal of Thanksgiving that was celebrated 55 years before the Pilgrims would even arrive at Plymouth Rock. After about 12 days, Pedro marched his troops north. There was a hurricane going on. He found Fort Caroline lightly guarded. He was able to take it with ease, and then he returned here to St. Augustine, where his friends, the Timucuans, informed him of ships that had sailed south. Pedro realized these would be the French, and they'd come back for him. But he also realized they weren't going to fare well in the storm. So he continues his own march south, and he was right. He meets up with 150 shipwreck survivors. He asks them all a very important question: are you Catholic? Now, for Pedro Menendez, there was really only one correct answer, and that was yes. They said no, we are French Huguenots, and for that they were marched behind the sand dunes in groups of 30, dispatched back to their maker with the Spanish sword, and their bodies simply cast into the bay. There was a second group of about 100 that wanted to convert. Now Pedro, he liked that answer. Took them captive for 2 days, but then realized he couldn't feed them. The next group met the same demise. Now really, in fairness to Pedro Menendez, he set sail from Spain with 11 ships. He only arrived with 5. The others, they sunk in storms with his supplies. So he didn't have enough for his own people. Look at forward here to the left, you'll see a first wall of defense coming out the side. The wall structure here is called the Kubo Wall. It would go from the fort through the city gates and then all the way down to the San Sebastian River, about a half a mile. We became a walled city, or what was known as a presidio, primarily because of pirate attacks. It was Sir Francis Drake who attacked us first in 1586 with 2,000 privateers. A privateer, that's really nothing but a highfalutin word for a pirate sailing under the cover of the British flag. He burned our city to the ground, chased us into the swamps. We had nothing to greet us out there but snakes and alligators. We did survive, though. We came back and built our walls. We had a second wall that was called the Rosario. It was an earthen berm that would have started about where this stop sign is here on the right. It would have gone to the left or south, about 9 blocks where it would have been the water of the bay. All the living quarters would have been back here to the left. Swampy areas on the other sides of our walls. Stationed along the walls, we had little mini forts called redoubts. If you look to the right, you'll see a reproduction of our Santo Domingo redoubt fort. The notches you see cut out of it are where we would place our cannons. We would defend the walls 24/7 with cannon and musket fire. On the back side of the redoubt, you'll see a thicket of palms underneath a notch where the cannon would have stuck out, and also in the corner there. Those palms look innocent enough, but they're called the Spanish bayonet plant. If you tried to sneak through a thicket of that, you got a hole sliced up. It's kind of like going through modern-day razor wire. Now we'll take a trip forward in history. The building to the left here was known as the Orange Street School. It was built in 1910. If you were lucky enough to be a teacher here, you taught grades 1 through 12 for a whopping sum of $20 a month. Now, if that sounds like too much work for too little pay, you could have been a bus driver. You know, back then, though, it meant a horse and buggy. You would have picked the kids up in the swampy areas where the snakes and alligators lived. You delivered them to school for the same amount, $20 a month. Now, this building here to the right, everybody take a good hard look at this. Isn't she a beauty? This beautiful building has absolutely no historical significance. Okay, maybe a little bit. It's our very first parking garage. You know, the site of our parking garage was also the site of the first luxury hotel in Florida, the San Marco. When the San Marco Hotel stood here, it was 5 stories tall. It had 3 towers on the front side. The tallest tower, you could see it as far as 16 miles out into the Atlantic Ocean. They had steam heat, electricity, running water, and something called an Otis elevator. No climbing stairs for you. They had a very important guest to our history stay here, Mr. Henry Morrison Flagler. He was one of the founders in the Standard Oil Trust. He was here celebrating his honeymoon with his second wife, Miss Ida Alice. I don't understand Mr. Flagler. You know, on his honeymoon, he brought his business partner with him. When I went on my honeymoon, I only brought my wife with. Isn't that the way it's supposed to work? You know, later in that marriage, Miss Ida Alice, she threatened to kill him. Some people blame it on the opium medicine that she was taking. But you know, I think she was taking that medicine because of him in the first place. Across the water here to the left, you'll see the Visitor Information Center. It's made out of coquina stone. It was built by the Works Progress Administration on the WPA in 1930 as a public works project. There's a free museum in there. They have a scale model of Pedro's flagship. It's got a cutaway so you can look inside and see what it looked like on the inside. This is stop number 2. If you're getting off here, please wait for the bell. Exit to the left, backing like a ladder, hold tight with 2 hands. And we're going to continue. When you hear the bell again, please remain seated. All aboard. Getting off now. Now you probably noticed the construction project going on across the street. This is a little mini version of the San Marco Hotel. We have a height ordinance today. You can't build anything as grand as or tall as the original. When they started their project, they dug this really deep hole, 2 stories in the ground. There's actually a parking garage underneath all this. They were pumping water 24/7. All the water you see over here to the right, that will drain down to the ground. They did finish the parking garage. They turned the pumps off. The water came back. Would you want to park your car over there? I don't think that's a good idea. They also dug out of the ground some of our state tree, the sable palm. The sable palm was used as a source of food by the Florida crackers. They cut the heart of the palm out when it was young, throw it into a pot of water, and add salt and pepper and a little pork. They'd boil that down, called it swamp cabbage. The Florida crackers were Scotch-Irish cattlemen. They would drive their cattle through the swampy areas of Florida using a bullwhip. You could hear the cracking of their bullwhip as far as a mile away. It's how they got the name cracker, from the Spanish word for cracker, craqueros. They were a wild group. They stayed just outside the long arm of the law. We are the first cowboys to North America, the wild, wild southeast down here. Now over to the right, you see a big ball of coquina stone. It looks kind of like the Death Star in the Star Wars movies. It's actually a mile marker number 0 of the Spanish Trail. The other end of the trail ends in San Diego, California. And there's another ball of coquina. Just like the Huguenot Cemetery here, to the right, was established in 1821. We had a horrible outbreak of the yellow fever. The mosquito-borne disease killed 1/3 of our population. You only see about 90 headstones here. Don't let it fool you, though. Each of those can represent an additional 25 graves. If you were the last to be buried there, you were the lucky one because you got your name chiseled or etched in stone. Those that died before you had markers, but they were wood and they rotted away. Our next stop is an exclusive for Old Town Trolley, Potter's Wax Museum. Potter's is the oldest wax museum in North America, the 2nd largest in the world when it first opened. You can get 30% off your admission by showing your trolley sticker at the door. But on the front end of the wax museum is a free attraction called the Old Drugstore. In 1886, T.W. Spicer arrived in Florida thinking he'd make a killing in the orange industry. A man failed to realize oranges grow on trees. It takes quite a few years to get a crop. He didn't have time to wait, so he went back to his first trade, which was a druggist. In T.W.'s day, you didn't need a prescription.